So, what is your opinion on the Montreal right now?
On Montreal. Okay, so basically what's going on is that several months ago our provincial government put out a new budget where they instituted an approximately 75% increase in what we're going to pay in university tuition. So this is problematic for a number of reasons, because with this 75% increase for what students are going to pay, there's also a withdrawal of public funding from the government. So basically, students are being forced to take increased responsibility for their schooling, and there's also an increase in corporate funding. So it sort of just goes with this broader trend in society of privatization of public services, austerity measures in the midst of rising economic inequality. So that's sort of problematic. And yeah, so what we see going on with the protests and stuff here, it's basically people just sort of going out and saying what they think, what kind of Quebec, what kind of province they want to have, and also sort of questioning what is government for. So you have government instituting these policies that, sure, they work for the political system or for politics in the short term, but they don't really take into consideration long-term repercussions. So yeah, anyway, I think that, did you ask me what I feel about?
Just
Right.
yeah, just actually the state of Montreal.
Mhm.
What about where do you fall on the tuition-funded education slash tax-funded education spectrum, and how do you think that students should pay for college, or
Right,
college
so
should be paid for?
yeah, obviously that's an issue. Like if students aren't going to pay this, so basically what's happening now is I think students in Quebec pay something like around 15% of the total cost of their university education. The government and private companies subsidize the rest. So they want to increase it so that we're going to be paying, I don't know exactly what percentage, but so right now it's already heavily subsidized. So obviously, like, the money, if we're not going to pay it, the money needs to come from somewhere. And yeah, so there, I mean, we can steepen our progressive taxation system, which, I mean, not only it will generate more income for the government, more revenue, but it also sort of helps balance out this rising economic inequality that we see. That, I mean, stratification of education and educational attainment aside, economic inequality in society yields all sorts of other health and social problems that we don't need to talk about right now. But so yeah, just sort of steepening that progressive taxation system, that'll increase revenue to the government in a huge way. Also in Quebec, just an example, right now there's a commission looking into corruption in the federal and the provincial and municipal governments. The government's really closely tied to the construction industry, which is largely led by mafia. Anyway, there's all sorts of links there, and just huge amounts of money being wasted. So why is that happening at the same time that students are being asked to pay a 75% increase? Like, if you try to institute a 75% increase on services on any other segment of society, of course they're going to respond negatively.
How would you respond to the people that say that the students do not have the right to other people's money as far as higher taxes to pay for the university of certain individuals?
Yeah, so there's that. Like, why should rich people, why should big corporations pay for our education? Well, because they can afford to, and it's not really going to inconvenience them or be detrimental to them in any significant way. Like, that sort of stratification is going to stay in place. But yeah, so it's basically like, do students pay now when, you know, we're trying to be full-time students, we're trying to get good grades so that we have a degree that we can do something with afterwards. I mean, if I go to school for 4 years and I'm forced to work full-time while I'm trying to be a student full-time, obviously that's going to be detrimental to my marks. So yeah, it's sort of, I mean, you can ask us to pay now, or you can ask us to pay once we've graduated, we've got degrees, we've managed to secure some kind of fruitful employment, and we're not forced to just sort of graduate with all this debt and take the first thing that comes at us. whether or not it's what we studied or it's personally fulfilling or beneficial to society because we're in a desperate situation. So yeah, there's that, or you can just we can pay it back through taxation. And in Quebec, we pay huge amounts of taxes, and I'm totally down with that. But I think that it just sort of seems more fair that we sort of pay for our education once we're able to, which is when we've graduated and become, productive members of society and are much more secure and better able to contribute to taxation, which, is used to fund education. So, yeah, I think it's just a matter of delaying, but we will pay for it.
What is Bill 78, and what is your opinion on it?
Okay, so Bill 78, basically, we've had protests going on in Montreal, ongoing for 105 or 106 days now, and around the end of April, they basically became nightly. So the government was just not responding in any way. We had some negotiations that didn't really come out very well. So toward the end of April, basically, the student organizations organized so that every night at 8 o'clock, we would go out and we would protest. So the government, in order to sort of put these down, the government instituted a law that has a number of stipulations. So, for example, any protest or organization over 50 people, they have to have provided their itinerary, the duration of their protest and everything to the government or to the police 8 hours in advance. There's a municipal section that says that you're not allowed to wear masks or anything like that. If you're caught wearing a mask at a protest, you can immediately be fined. There's also other things like the Minister of Education is given all sorts of, basically, I can't remember the exact wording, but the Minister of Education, who was not elected by the people, I'm sure the Premier who appointed this person was elected, but we did not elect the Minister of Education, and this person has the right to make any change to Bill 78 or any other provincial law as they see fit, essentially. So that's kind of problematic. And then there's also just basically almost forcing an end to the strike. Students that are on strike will be forced to go back to school in August. But the main sort of things are just it curtails freedom of expression, freedom of association, that sort of thing, by putting all these restrictions on it. And it's been, basically no one has really been following it. There's actually a movement, like I disobey, arrest me someone, because people sort of feel this moral obligation, I think, to go against this law because they consider it unjust. So as far as the provincial government goes, it's been a massive blunder on their part, which almost makes me wonder if maybe the government instituted that law knowing that, if they send out hundreds of riot cops every night, force throughout history, force is met with force. So maybe it was just sort of a tactic to encourage that escalation of force and violence, because if students are reacting with violence, it makes it easier for the provincial government to sort of rally public opinion against them. So I'm almost wondering if that was sort of their tactic. Anyway, it hasn't worked very well. It's led to several nights of just mass, untargeted, non-discriminate kettling arrests, essentially, which is a huge waste of resources. And this is on people who did nothing illegal except showed up. They were present. And then also Bill 78, it doesn't. There's no deterrence to violence. Basically, those who are it's like punishment of the masses rather than stricter punishments on sort of like violent behavior and things like that. There's nothing different in Bill 78 for people who are engaging in stuff like that. It's essentially, you show up, you can be arrested.
Okay, what is kettling?
So kettling is it's a tactic often used at protests and riots and things like that, where the police essentially just kind of like close in on a massive group and put them in smaller and smaller quarters, and either just arrest them then or just sort of let it go until, these people they can't get out. They're deprived of food, of water, of just like basic movement, and chaos often ensues. And then the police are justified in arresting them. But in my situation, I was arrested on the first night that this new law was in place, and it was essentially a peaceful protest. We turned a corner, huge line of riot cops. We turned around the other way, huge line of riot cops, and they just sort of trapped us, a group of peaceful protesters. You all, yeah. that was sort of a.
Anything else you want to say or say to Americans?
I guess, yeah, there's a lot of just sort of people want us to get off the streets and like shut up and just sort of forget about all of this. And I think it's just sort of important to remember, like in a democratic society, sure we all have the right to vote, and a lot of people say that makes democracy equal, right? The problem is that beyond voting, which everyone should do, and in Quebec even, the voting rate is not that high, especially among young people. So, anyone in Quebec who's watching this, who's involved in this movement or feels sympathetic toward it or not, just make sure that you go and vote, because that's really important. But beyond that, I think protests and more non-routine forms of political involvement and activism are incredibly important, especially now with just sort of basically there are other actors in society that have far more political might than students have. Okay, so, and we don't have huge amounts of money, but we have our bodies and we have our voices and we have our pots and pans, and I think it's really important that we use those to sort of make our presence known, because we don't necessarily have other means of doing so.
Okay, what is your degree and grade level?
I'm in my final year, double major in history and sociology, and I'm planning to go into social work.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.